The $1,000,000 question: how do entrepreneurs transition from self-employed to owning a business that turns a profit? My name is Chris Waters, and this podcast has the $1,000,000 answer. Welcome to CEO Secrets. Hey guys, it's Chris Waters, the host of CEO Secrets. Super excited to have you guys on today. I've got an amazing guest I'm super pumped to have. Her name is Janae from Colorado Springs, who her and her husband also have a real estate business in Colorado Springs, and she's an expert on the recruiting and selection process. Janae, thanks so much for being on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about this today. This is one of my favorite subjects on the planet. So thanks for having me today.
You know, I've read, I hope we can share some books, because two of my favorite books right now around the recruiting and selection process is one called The Rare Find by a guy named George Anders. And the second book, which came out recently, is called Culture Code, which is, I don't know if you read Culture Code yet?
I've not read Culture Code. I know Rare Find, it's a great book.
Kind of an old one, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's been around. It's been around for a while.
So what are your favorite books around recruiting and selection?
So my very favorite book around recruiting and selection is, well, I have a couple. Hiring for Attitude, which is really geared towards large corporations, but it's a great book. It has really great nuggets, even for small business owners. And then I also love Work Rules, which is about the recruiting process that Google went through and has gone through. And that's by the former HR head at Google, which he started a new company now. Those are two of my favorites. The book I'm currently reading is called, it's a textbook. It's called Judgment in Managerial Decision-Making for Behavioral Economics, which is something that I love to study, psychology and behavioral economics and why people do what they do, which becomes imperative in the recruiting process to understand people psychologically. So that's the book I'm right now reading. And I always have to look at it because it's 7th edition, and it's actually the textbook they use in organizational behavior in several companies and in several graduate programs. So
I'm literally writing this stuff down. So I'm so sorry. I did a horrible job of introducing you. All I can think about are all these questions. So I spent all this time putting all these questions together, because I just wanted to hammer you with so many questions, and I did a horrible job asking you to introduce yourself. So before we go any further, I gave a terrible introduction of you. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about your background, how you got in real estate, about you have a consulting business where you help people with the recruiting and selection process. Walk us through, give us the 60-second version, a little bit about you.
Okay, so my name is Janae Daniels. I started in hiring and recruiting for large corporations about 15 years ago. And my husband and I got married. I worked for Manpower International there in Austin, Texas. And I left that top school for a little bit because I kind of got burned out with recruiting. And then my husband and I met and married. He's from Colorado Springs, so we moved here. So his story is a little bit was sad at the beginning. He got into real estate in 2003, and he had 2 kids and a little, and just started real estate. And a month after he got into real estate, his ex-wife said, "I don't want to be a mother. I don't want to be a wife. Have a good life." We met 3 years later, and actually 2 years later, we got married in 2006. I came up here and relocated to Colorado Springs. So in 2009, he was working so much that I said to him, I feel like you need to hire somebody. And he said, I tried that twice and it was a nightmare and it was terrible and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and he's like, well, what if we can't afford it? I know, he was at this point, he was selling 50 homes by himself. And good. I said, yeah, he was doing great. And I said, I can take care of that. So without telling him, I posted a job ad, I screened candidates, and then one day I'm like, okay, so here's the deal. I have 2 candidates for you. You're interviewing them tomorrow. I put it on your schedule. You get to pick one. And that's how it started. And he was like, what? Oh my gosh. And so I said, don't worry, it's just part-time. Well, within 3 months, we had to move them full-time. A year later, we brought on our first couple buyer's agents. And even though I had all this experience experience in the past with working in recruiting before, what I found was like there were not the resources for small business owners that there were for large corporations. And so that's when I started studying and researching and trying to understand the recruiting process and how do you weed out really terrible human beings that are mean and toxic, because that's why most people are fired. It's not because they don't have the skills. It's because they're 89% are fired because they're toxic, they gossip, they're entitled, they don't work very hard, they're lazy. And so I started going, okay, so how do we keep our team members good? And it was kind of like our process has kind of been like watching The Sandlot when they're trying to get the ball back. And
Sure.
so they start by, simply, and then suddenly they're like trying to go over the fence, and then they get out Tinker Toys. And that's what happened with our recruiting process. And in the meantime, I'm doing hundreds of hours of research to understand psychologically what happens when you hire, and how does good retention look, and what's going on. And I've done, by this time, I've done thousands of interviews, not just, from my prior experience, but then also doing interviews with our team members. So long story short, before I knew it, I wasn't just helping our team. I was getting calls from doctors and dentists and veterinarians. And so I work, my company is called DIY Hiring, and we essentially consult with very small business owners, the 0 to 20 employees, on how to hire for retention, how to hire for keeps. And so, and because Jason and I are married, I continue to hire for our team. And over the years, I developed what I call the Daniels hiring process. So it's our process to hire so that we hire for keeps. And in some ways, it's very unconventional, with particularly in the real estate industry on hiring, because I found that in real estate, again, I hire for multiple industries and I consult with multiple industries, but in real estate, I hear the same bad information being repackaged, repurposed, and resold a lot of times by real estate coaches. And I'm like, oh, that's terrible information. And you're gonna burn people out, and you're gonna burn and churn people, and you don't want to do that. You want to be able to hire so that people stay long term. And so over the years, we've learned, okay, this is how you hire for retention, and this is what you do. And yeah, so that's what I do. That's who I am.
Yeah, great. Well, let me ask you some questions. So in the real, I'll just share with you a little bit of what I experienced building a real estate team in Austin is like finding W-2 staff.
Mm-hmm.
Operational staff was a lot less difficult than hiring salespeople.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things you could do. The interview process, reference checks, some practical applications you actually have them do as part of the interview process, which helped us improve things. But the interview process itself, prior to actually giving them an offer letter, I always say is a bunch of BS for salespeople, because you don't actually know who's going to make it until you see them in action. And so one of the things I took away from the book, The Rare Find by George Anders, when he studied all these, elite organizations, actually the story that was very inspirational to me was when he talked about Teachers for America and how she set up a mock classroom as part of the interview process. And so, and then beyond Teach for America, a lot of just, really high level organizations, even once you get accepted into the organization, there's, this continuous like vetting process. Like you're not actually an associate of the company until a certain amount of time has passed and you've hit certain milestones. And a lot of times those milestones aren't even production related. And so, our process and theory and what we execute and implement on is kind of what we call the extended interview process, which is 90 days after we hire them. And, we're looking for, key specific things in those 90 days. What's your philosophy? There's so many questions I want to ask you. I don't even know where to start. So what's your philosophy on the, just from the front of the funnel, like getting people into the interview process? Let's just start from the beginning. Like at the front of the funnel, like get as many people in the funnel, right? And then like, what's the logistical process there to get them to a point where you're giving them an offer? And then what's the logistical process after you give them an offer? Like, after you've said, hey, come on board, what are you doing after that? To walk me walk me through the logistics.
So let me walk you through the whole process. This is what we do. And I do this for every company. And this is what I tell companies to do. So first of all, I have to, and I tell people, like it's in our job ad, right off the bat, our process is super long. Because that length enables you to really see the candidate and weed out people who are going to ghost you and weed out people who are really not interested. So that's the first thing is I tell everyone, like, your process has to be long. So this is what our process. I post a job ad, and actually at this point, I'm going to interject a lot because I'm gonna have a lot of questions along the way. So don't take it the wrong way. So you post a job ad. Is there any special messaging you get to attract talent from like a marketing perspective to attract people? Like, what do you put in the headline? What do you put in the body? Okay, so first of all, my job ads are freaking hilarious. I was a comedian back in my past life, back in college.
Cool.
Did improv and stand up. And so by nature, like I want to sometimes be a little saucy and it started coming out. It started as an accident a few years ago when I was typing a job ad and I was really frustrated. And so I got really saucy in the job ad. I'm like, look, we don't have benefits except for we do offer unlimited Dr. Pepper and cookies. What else do you want? And so our job ads are really long, but they are also very specific and they're funny. And so we tend to get quirky people who start reading it and start to chuckle. And they're very honest. Like right at the beginning, we're like, most people fail in real estate. It's not like HGTV. If you want to be on HGTV, go talk to Joanne Gaines. And most people in real estate are making less than my teenage son is making in fast food. And so with the job ad, you have to put yourself into the ad, like your voice has to come through. And I read ads for fun and to see what my competition is doing. And they all sound very sterile. And so if your ad can stand out by just sounding like a human as opposed to like, we want to hire rock stars for our real estate team. We're super great, but putting real and funny and honest into the ad and letting them know, look, our process is long. This is what you get. This is great. So that's the first thing is our job ads are long and they're funny.
Where do you like to post job ads? What are your favorite places to advertise?
My very favorite has been Indeed. That's where I've seen the best number of candidates that are qualified. I've used LinkedIn. I've used ZipRecruiter. I've used WiseHire in the past. I've used Glassdoor and Monster. So I've used a whole lot of places. A lot of times I'll go to college job boards. And so I'll be recruiting in Utah next month because you get a lot of those people who've served LDS missions and they are not afraid to door knock. So I'm like, awesome. That's a perfect place to recruit people. They do make great sense. So I'll be recruiting in Utah next month. And so within the next couple of weeks, I'll be going to the University of Utah alumni site, the career services at BYU, career services at Utah State. And so I go to local colleges and universities as well. But as far as like to get to the general populace, I use Indeed. I get the best return on my investment with Indeed.
What would you do if, let's say you were working with a team that was located in a market where there's very few agents? So it's actually a very lucrative market for agents because there's not an abundance of them. What would you do when you just got a small pond to fish from to find and locate agents to join your team? What would you tell that person to do if they're just like massively struggling to find talent because of that small pool?
Okay, so a couple things. First of all, they need to look at their compensation, and they need to look at what their value proposition is. What are they giving that people would want to draw people? First of all. Second thing is they might start wanting to look into other industries and start poaching people from other industries. But then also they may have to recruit outside of their town, especially if you're in a very small community. Recruit outside of that community, and you're going to have to sell that community. Why is it that you want to live, that somebody would want to live in this little community, and what would be the benefits, and what will you offer this person, not just monetarily, but emotionally and within your company, because so a study just came out 2 months ago by Deloitte on millennials in the workplace. And the number one thing that millennials are looking for, which they're going to make up half the workforce next year. And so the number one thing that they're looking for is to be with a company that they can trust, that the company is going to do the right thing, which most people don't realize. They think that millennials want ping pong tables, which is not what they want. And so if you can set up a culture in your company where they can trust you, and then you really sell that and let them see that, and as well as make it monetarily enticing for them, then you're going to be able to draw people.
So in the real estate space, salaries for salespeople is not very common. In the real estate brokerage space, would you encourage somebody to offer a salary to attract somebody in?
You could. I'd definitely talk to an attorney about that while you do it, because there's all sorts of laws around, W-2s versus 1099s with each state. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we've done for our team, because now I don't do a lot of recruiting, like I don't have to go out and solicit business, is that we offer we call it a paid working interview. So we go through our long hiring process, which we might circle back around to what that looks like. But then when they're invited to come on the team, we say, okay, the next 60 days, we're going to train you and we're going to pay you $2,500 a salary a month to bridge that gap of when you start to sell, and so that you can have some amount to live on. And we don't allow those people to sell. They're W-2s during that time. They come in 8:30 to 5:30, and it's a boot camp, and we put them through the ringers. But to even get onto that boot camp is a long process. Because of that, I don't have a shortage of talent approaching me. Right now, I don't have any job ads for our team. I'm about to post some next week, but I've already had people start calling and saying, hey, I've heard about your team. I'd like to get on for your next boot camp, which is coming up in November. And because we have a boot camp going on right now. So the next one is in November. And so people are like, what do I do? How do I start? So whereas most teams have to fight to find people, now we have people coming to us. So that's that 60 days. We pay for their training and we pay for their boot camp, and we get to see them in the raw, and which I can talk to you more about what we do in boot camp once we get to that point. But it's enabled us to have a lot of talent come to us.
Cool. That's a great idea. Okay, so you post job ad, make it look, really differentiate, try to really connect with people. Mm-hmm. Indeed.com, college job boards, in the real estate space, maybe potentially do the paid working interview. So now you've got some leads coming in. What's next in the process? Okay, so I'm going to lay out the whole process. Once I get the resume, I look over the resume. I look for 4 things. That's it. I look to see if they spell stuff correctly. I look to see how long they've been at jobs. I look to see if they have any jobs that could even remotely translate. And then I look at also their education, but I'm not as concerned about that. What I do then is actually with admin candidates, if they don't spell stuff correctly, I get rid of them. And if I see, with both sales candidates and admin candidates, if I see that they've never been in a job more than about 3 years at a time, I get rid of them, because they're eternal job hoppers. You don't need those in your company. So I send everybody else an email that says, thanks for doing this. Now I need you to complete an online interview. I use a company called Spark Hire. I love them. I'm not affiliated with them, but I use them. And they have to do a video interview. And inevitably, there's always somebody who doesn't want to. And I'm like, well, if they can't even, don't want to or don't want to follow the process, I cut them there. Or if they're not technologically savvy enough to complete an online interview, I'm like, and you shouldn't be in real estate where we deal a lot with tech. Yeah. So I go through the Spark Hire interview. Once I get those in, if I see that a person doesn't complete the Spark Hire, I email them again and say, hey, and actually I started putting it just in the job ad, complete the Spark Hire interview, upload your resume.
Once I've weeded out people through the Spark Hire interview, I do a telephone interview with the ones I'm interested in. I weed out 90% of the people in the Spark Hire interview. So, which is great because I can watch those videos in 7 minutes, 8 minutes and know, yes, I want this to go on with this person or not.
So talk to me more about what you're looking for in that video interview.
I am looking for a few things. Number one of the questions that I ask is, what do you need to make to live comfortably? In many states, you cannot ask anymore by law, not all states, but many states, you can't ask, how much did you make in your previous positions? But I can say, how much do you need to make to live comfortably? If they're within the range that we are projected that they could do, then I'm like, okay, good. If they're like way off base and they're like, I want to make $2 million, and some people will say ridiculous things like that, then I'm like, not so much. I ask them a time that they failed in a work-related project. I ask them the greatest misconception their coworkers have about them, and then I ask them some kind of generic questions. Why did you get into real estate? Why did you want to apply for our team? But the ones that I'm most interested in are, tell me about a time you failed in a work-related project. So here's the deal. Statistically speaking, people who are entitled and toxic use a certain kind of language. Specifically, they'll speak in third person, future or present tense, because they want to separate themselves from the question. For example, they'll say things like, well, you should never fail in a project. You should always do your best. I failed a lot of times, and I always put my best foot forward. Really high performing people will say, okay, I failed in a work-related project. This is what happened. I was supposed to do this. I messed up. I screwed up. I learned a lesson. I felt so bad. I went to my boss. I did this and I did this. And so they'll give a very specific in first person, past tense, specific example, and they'll take ownership. Again, most people don't do that. I weed them out really quick because we know psychologically low performers are going to separate themselves by behavioral questions. The second question I ask is, what's the greatest misconception your coworkers have about you? Here's the secret. It's never a misconception. Whatever they say is always the truth. If they say, and I had this happen where a lady said, well, the greatest misconception my coworkers have about me is that I'm a witch. But once they get to know me, they know I'm really awesome, blah, 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 blah. Well, what I've discovered is that it's always the truth. In that case, we hired that lady on, and immediately the team, and this is 5 or 6 years ago, said, she's a witch. Like, she's mean. And even when they got to know her, they're like, she's mean. So whatever that misconception is, and that's why the question is great, because it cloaks it in a misconception, is always the truth. And you have to decide, is that something that I'm willing to live with if they were to come on my team? Mm-hmm. So once I've weeded those people out, we move on to the telephone interview. In the telephone interview, I want specifics about their past. I want to know why they left jobs. I want to know how they felt about their coworkers and about their bosses. So if those people that I really like, I'll move forward, and the rest I'll say thank you very much for your time and let them know I'm not moving them forward.
So let me recap really quickly. I'm taking like feverish notes right now. I don't know if you've done like that. So video interview, when you do the Spark video interview, the 3 key questions, it sounds like, is greatest misconception people have about you. Tell me more about your greatest failure in the workforce. And you're paying attention to how they, place themselves, whether it's taking ownership or future tense, present tense, third person. You said you also want to ask them about what they want to make income-wise to live comfortably. And yes. then you said in the telephone interview, you ask about how do they feel about their bosses, previous bosses?
Yeah, how do they feel about their previous bosses? Tell me about your work environment. So what happens is whatever they say about past bosses is what they're going to say about you. And if they start to be diplomatic and they're trying really hard, even if you can tell that they didn't like that boss, they're going to be diplomatic with you too. Really toxic people, you open that can of worms with their boss and they will vomit all over you. Oh my gosh, they were terrible. They were awful. Blah, blah. And the thing is, it's rarely the boss. It's usually the person.
So what about when you ask them the question, why did you leave their job? What are you looking for?
I'm looking for honesty. And so I'll ask them point blank, did you quit or were you fired? And why did you quit? Why were you fired? And so, because I want to hear, do I hear honesty, or are they trying to avoid the question? If they're trying to avoid the question, then there's probably a good reason that they were fired. Usually people will be pretty honest and say, yeah, I got fired. One girl said, I got fired because I totally slept in almost every day.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, thank you for letting me know that.
So what would you do if someone said that? You're like, oh, thanks.
I finished up, I just finished the interview. I always try to leave people really positive, because I don't know if I'm ever going to meet that person again. And I want to leave people better than I found them. So I usually am like, thank you for the interview and talking with me. And I finish up the rest of the questions and then close up. I usually shorten them, but I finish up and I'm like, okay, well, thank you. I'll let you know in the next day. So yeah, so that's what I do.
Cool. So just for those of you guys watching on Facebook, some people might be watching this on replay, but if you're watching this on Facebook, feel free to chat. Put any comments in the chat box if you're watching this on Facebook, and maybe we can ask Janae any questions live for those of you guys that are in our private Facebook group. Janae, what's crazy about this is, like, I don't know if people understand like how valuable this content is. Like, I don't even know if most people can truly quantify this, but I went through every real estate coaching program imaginable between 2010 and 2014 and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I hired somebody outside of the industry that was a leadership coach for some Fortune 500 CEOs. And the guy said to me, he said, Chris, 80% of your success is predicated on your ability to recruit and select people. And so if there's anybody watching this that if you feel like you don't have enough hours in the day, you're frustrated with your growth, you're frustrated with people, it's probably because you haven't mastered the recruiting and selection process, or you haven't found someone to help you, like you, Janae. They need to hire someone like you. So I just wanted to throw that out there because we are on Facebook Live, and so if anybody has any questions, feel free to chime in. We just had someone named Stephen Marshall chime in saying this is crazy good info. So man, I am so excited to have you on today. Like, we're gonna hang out sometime because I'm gonna fly out to Denver. I'm gonna buy that. I'm not kidding. I'm gonna buy that textbook because I'm like so fascinated with this whole process. Like, I went down that rabbit hole of studying like Harvard, Yale, Apple, Google, teach from Reno. But anyways, let's dive back in. So now we're at the point of like doing the phone interview. You mentioned the questions. What's the next step in the process?
So next step is I do face-to-face interviews. So I ask behavioral interview questions.
Tell me more about that. Behavioral interview questions face-to-face.
Okay, so behavioral interview questions. First of all, behavioral interview questions are statistically the best questions that you can ask to get the best future indication of future performance. So what a behavioral question is, it's a very specific question that asks about a specific past experience. For example, tell me about a time that you didn't get along with a coworker. Tell me about a time that you received tough feedback from your boss. Tell me about a time that you got bad feedback from a client. Tell me about a time that you didn't get along with your coworker. Tell me about a time that you received feedback that you disagreed with and you still had to follow protocol. So very specific questions. A lot of people who look at behavioral questions will add, what did you do at the end, or tell me more about that. Get rid of those questions, because the added, what did you do at the end of the question, psychologically puts in people's mind that they should have a positive answer. And you want to get what's raw and real, not just a positive answer. And so I ask a series.
Let's role play this out, okay? So you're interviewing me, mm-hmm. and let's just say let's just role play this out. So like, let's pretend like you're asking me about a time I worked somewhere and I had a boss that I didn't like.
Okay, Chris, tell me about a time that you received tough feedback from your supervisor.
So when I was younger, I had a sales team leader that was, telling me what I was doing wrong in the sales process to get somebody committed. He said my tone of voice was very monotone, and he said that I spent very little time building rapport and connecting with the prospect.
And how'd you feel about that, Chris?
In the moment, to be honest, I was pretty, I was pretty pissed because I thought I did pretty good. I did a good job, but my conversions sucked. I was going and meeting clients, and I kept falling on my face. And so, it took me a couple days, but after I swallowed my pride and I actually started implementing what he said, things actually got better.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next question. Okay.
Cool.
So, good job. You did great.
Yeah!
Yes. Again, what I was listening for was first of all, did you take ownership or did you blame your boss?
Mm-hmm.
The second thing I was listening for was what verb tense were you using? Were you speaking in present tense? First person, or were you speaking in third person? I wanted to hear first person, which you did. Awesome. And then the second thing I was listening for was, were you speaking in past tense or future or present tense? And I wanted to hear past tense. And so you took let's a very specific example. You tell him you fixed it, and then you moved on. Good job.
Cool. So let's say the opposite happened. Somebody had a boss and they said that instead of them taking ownership, they're like, my boss was a terrible trainer, didn't make sense. And they weren't, taking responsibility. That's when it's a red flag.
Yeah. Then you go, that's a big red flag. And continue to listen to that and ask more questions about the boss.
So when do you give someone like a pass, right? Because so you've explained so far, this process, right? And there's a lot of opportunities where someone can kick themselves off get kicked off the bus.
That's the hope.
When do you give someone a pass, right? When do you give them some grace and be like, okay, maybe that boss they had was a crappy trainer or whatever?
I give them a pass when I hear diplomacy, that they're not trying to speak ill of the boss, but rather like the actions that happened. That's really an important thing, because there's personal attacks, and then there's, for example, I did an interview and the lady was like, I said, why'd you leave the company? And she said, well, things were uncomfortable for me. And I said, what happened? And she said, I didn't see eye to eye with my boss, and my boss is a good person. I don't feel like it was, I don't feel like they were trying to do harm or do bad, but we disagreed on some fundamental things, and I felt like I couldn't continue there. So she didn't say that the boss was terrible. She didn't say ugly things about the boss. So I ended up bringing her on to that company, and she's been there years, and they love her because she still is very diplomatic, and in that she was diplomatic. But the more interviews that you do, and like I said, I've done like over 3,000, 3,500 interviews. Like I stopped counting at about 1,000 interviews many years ago. You start to hear a very distinct difference in blaming people versus talking about behavioral dislikes. And that's where the separation comes, because if I hear blame, this person was terrible and awful and mean, and they hated me. And if I hear victim, and that's the other thing, is if I hear victim from a person, I absolutely don't want them on my team. And so I was consulting with an agent in California, and he said, I've got this guy and he's super great, and he left his company because they were so awful to him. And I can understand, I'd feel bad. I'm like, whoa. Did he sound like a victim? And he said, yes. And I said, then you absolutely don't hire him, because he'll be the victim to you, period. End of story.
Okay. So there's so much I want to ask. Okay. So face-to-face interview, behavioral questions. What's next?
Okay, then I do a bunch of skills testing. I send them a battery of skills tests, depending on the kind of position I'm hiring for, or the company is hiring for. That depends on what test.
So like,
so salespeople, you administer sales tests, you administer.
and when you say sales test, do you mean like for a salesperson, do you like a mock sales presentation, for example?
No, I full on have it. I work with a company and I email them a sales test that has been put together by psychologists, and they answer all the questions, and the tests score their validity and how much they're being honest on the test. And then it also scores their different aspects of how good they're going to be at sales. And it gives a projection based on their answers. And I also send a personality profile.
Okay, so that's one of the questions I want to ask you about personality profiling, but also regarding the sales test, we can just lump those in. So what's kind of fascinating is like I've hired people in sales roles that do not have the typical like high DI or ID, and they crush it as like NSC or C personality. And so like the thing I've always like told people is it's very hard to test the element of human desire.
Right.
Like somebody may have that internal desire to want to like go out and do something, and like there ain't no way you're going to stand in their path. They're going to figure it out, and they'll figure out how to be a master, even if it doesn't come natural to them. So, like, how much value do you put into disc profiling? And like this company, for example, you said you hired to send out tests. How much validity? Like, how much do you pay attention to that stuff? Like, how important is it really?
Okay, so for me, it's a data point, because like a disc test lets me know strengths in their personalities as well as weaknesses, but there are salespeople who are C's and who are S's, and they're good. So for me, it becomes a data point, because my whole objective in the hiring process is to try to get the whole total picture of the person. And so it's a data point for me. That's it. I don't hire and fire by the disc. I don't hire and fire by the sales test. But I will look and see, okay, so there's some red flags that came up in the sales test. Why? Let's ask some more questions and find out what's going on. Again, it's a data point. And so I've never not moved somebody on because of a personality test or a sales test, because it's a data point for me to look at the whole person.
You and your husband's real estate team in Colorado Springs, do you guys differentiate between buyer's agents and listing agents?
We used to. That's become, we're starting to do something different this year, because several of our agents have said, I want to take listings too. And our past real estate coaches have said, oh, you need buyer's agents and listing agents. And I was like, why? Why is that? Like, it's kind of it's arbitrary to me. So right now,
hey, I have to interject, because you're giving me massive value, so I want to reciprocate. Okay, so my like mission statement in the real estate industry is to help create clarity for people when they're brand new as agents, and help them understand that it's my opinion that there is a clear career trajectory. So like the thing corporate America does really, really well is they develop a really clear corporate ladder that people talk crap about, right? But like that ladder is what helps develop people to build these massive organizations. And so there, in my mind, there is a ladder from a career trajectory perspective. And so our philosophy is like, when you're brand new as an agent, there's 3 basic skills you have to master. One is inside sales, the inside sales component. 2 is the outside sales component, face-to-face. And then 3rd is being a market expert. So knowing contracts, et cetera. And then you got the buy side and the listing side, and they're different contracts and there's different processes. And so you actually start, if you start an agent off on the buy side, one, the contracts are typically in favor of the buyer. So it makes it easier to get them out. Yeah. And, the buyer isn't actually paying anything out of their own pocket. And buyers are much more forgiving through that process. There's not as many expenses we have to outlay when you're working with a buyer besides driving around. So it's like these are, it's great to work with buyers and physically drive around and like get to understand the market and learn how to like work a pipeline, et cetera. So anyways, my little advice is like, I know, I don't know if you know, I'm not in the coaching industry. We have a CEO masterclass, awesome. But I'm not in the coaching industry, but my, I don't know why other coaches recommend it this way, but my opinion is you start people off as like, hey, buyer's agent. Then if you want to become a listing agent, and you can also do both sides if you want. And then the next step is a leadership development program to get into like a leadership opportunity. I mean, that's kind of the career trajectory path in my mind for anybody in real estate brokers.
So, and that's actually how we currently do it is, and that's why in order to come on the team, like after they've completed boot camp, they have to be a buyer's agent for at least a year before they're introduced to listings.
Cool. Okay.
And so, but we have buyer's agents that are like, I don't want to give up working with buyers and I still want to do some listings. And that's where we're like, why not? Let's let them do it. And they've done a good job. We have a couple agents that are like, I solely want to do listings once I graduate from being a buyer's agent. And so Jason's training those people to be able to do that. And so, and then of course we also have the leadership. We don't have a leadership course, if you will, but we are training our people up as we go for leadership roles. And several of them are assigned as mentors for the agents that are in boot camp. And so we teach leadership throughout the process.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Yeah, we're on the same wavelength
as far as that goes.
So back to the logistics of the selection process. So talked about face-to-face, the behavioral stuff, the disc profile, just data points, the sales test. Tell me the next piece.
So next piece is they have to interview with our office manager. Now for new agents that are like building a team, you'd have them interview with somebody else in your office if you have other people in your office, or you have vendors, people you trust, even a spouse, interview the person because you want to get different eyes on that person. You want to get a different perspective on that person. Our office manager and I have very different personalities. Because of that, she sees things differently than I do. And so sometimes I'll be super excited about a candidate and they'll come in and she's like, I did not like them.
Yeah.
So she asks her questions, gets to know them, talks to them about the position. After her interview, we have our lead buyer's agent interview them. Again, if it's a new team, you get somebody else's perspective.
You guys do that at the same meeting? You do like the
we separate them. Again, we want to separate the process because a couple things happen. The longer the process is, number one, the more emotionally invested a candidate becomes in the company. Number two, it cuts down on ghosting, which has become very prevalent in the hiring, like with small businesses and even some large corporations where people just don't show up. And so you want the more interviews you can do. And again, comes to a point where you're like this, you don't need to do any more interviews. But that length of time allows them to decide, really, is this the company that they want to work for? And it gives them the time to think about that. It's as well as it gives us an opportunity to go, do I want this person on our very special team?
Yep.
So that's the next step is the
So in a spouse, someone with a different sense of perspective than you normally would interview them.
Right.
And then whoever's going to be their key leader would interview them.
Right.
And then what's after that?
Okay. So this is my favorite part. We do 2 days of shadowing. Specifically, and when we're working with buyer's agents, it's a little bit different than when we hire for admin. For admin, we'll actually have them do some tasks and we pay them because if you have somebody do actual legitimate tasks, you have to pay them at least minimum wage. But with our agents, we say, hey, we're going to do 2 days of shadowing. It's from 8:30 to 5:30. You're going to be working with all of the agents on our team. You're going to meet everybody on the team. You're going to meet the admin. You're going to meet everybody. So one thing that makes our team very unique, because people have tried recruiting from our team since we've made our hiring process airtight, and our team members are intensely loyal, is that we give our team a voice. So during these 2 days of shadowing, the entire team individually takes them out and interviews these people, and wherever the agents go, if it's an agent position, wherever the agents go, that person goes if they want to be an agent. And they get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly in real estate. Like, it's real time. They drive with the person, but at the same time, they get to ask our team members, what do you think of this team? What do you think of Jason? We heard great things. Is this true, or is it all garbage? So it gives our team members a chance to answer questions, but also evaluate the candidate, because if any one of our team members says, I don't like the person, they're done. There was a time when we had some toxic people on our team when we could not have done that. And when we realized, oh wait, we can't trust that person's going to have the team in the best interest to bring on people. So we ended up ultimately cutting those people after we're like, shoot, those are toxic people. And so we've taken the last 3 years to go, okay, now let's build a team. So our team has become very emotionally invested on the people that are brought on. And they'll get together like after 2 days of shadowing with a person, and we will hash it out. I like this, I didn't like this. And so that we do 2 days of shadowing.
So, okay, I got a question on the Facebook Live right now.
Yeah.
Somebody asked, what are the interview questions like for the additional interviewers? So you mentioned like the key person that does the first interview face-to-face, the behavioral questions. Then you mentioned like a spouse and the key leader. So like, let's say it's a spouse and then the key leader. What are those two people asking? Like what's their...
They're asking to get to know the personality a little bit better. They're asking behavioral questions.
Okay.
Tell me about a time you did this. Tell me about it. And there's hundreds of behavioral questions, which I'll be putting up a guide to behavioral questions on my website coming up in the next few weeks. So y'all can watch for that.
How do you train these key hires on the understanding what to look for in these behavioral interview questions? Like, how do you, for example, if you to have someone on your team facilitating this, they need to understand how to ask the behavioral questions, like the list.
Yes.
But then they also need to know how to digest the information. How do you train them on digesting the information to make a good decision on, whether they should recommend or not recommend that person?
Well, you walk them through it, right? I sit down with my team. Granted, we've been doing it for a long time, so they know it naturally. But at the beginning, I'm like, okay, first of all, these are the questions you're not allowed to ask legally. Mm-hmm. And then this is what we're asking, and this is what I want you to really listen for. But after each interview, they debrief with me, and they said, this is what they said, and this is what I think. Here's some things that I felt like they weren't saying. And so you just literally, like I just told you, okay, you're going to listen to first person past tense. And I want you to listen carefully to the language that you're using. Listen to if you hear victim, listen if you hear, if you hear these different things. But they also have their own, things that they like to interject. When our lead buyer's agent interviews, she's like, I like to ask them, are you ready to put in 70, 80 hours a week, and let it get ugly. Mm-hmm. Now, when we get to the shadowing, there's no set of questions that the agents or the admin ask. They just get to know the person. They're just shooting the breeze.
So after so tell me what happens after the 2 days of shadowing. What's the next step?
So next step is I do 9 reference checks. I do 3 reference checks with past supervisors, 3 with coworkers, and 3 with subordinates if they have any. If they don't, then I want more coworkers and supervisors. If everything checks out with those, go ahead.
So 3 coworkers, 3 past supervisors, and 3 subordinates or more supervisors, you said?
Mm-hmm. If they don't have subordinates, they've never, had to supervise anybody, then more supervisors and coworkers.
Okay, cool. So they passed this point. What's after that?
Then they interview with Jason. And he sits down, and I have to say, in the very beginning of the interview process, in the telephone interview, I go over commission splits right at the beginning, and throughout the process, I remind them, these are our commission splits. This is what we do. This is why we do it. So I set up the expectations right off the bat. I tell them, in the telephone interview, your picture will be on nothing but your business card. Jason's name is on everything. Jason's the brand, so they know that from day one what to expect. So there's no surprises when they get to the end. I go over, again, telephone review. These are the commission splits. This is what's expected. This is what we do. This is how we do it. This is how long our interview process is. And it's long. It'll take 2 months. So by the time they get to Jason, they really are just getting to know him as the CEO and the team leader and everything. So and then it goes into specific numbers of this is what, these are the commission splits. These are where our lead sources are. This is how much the splits are from these lead sources versus this. So he gets nitty-gritty.
Let me interject. So, okay, so this process up until this point of meeting Jason, for example, have they been getting paid or not been getting paid the $2,500 per month?
Oh, no.
They haven't been getting paid yet. Not yet. Okay.
Nope.
Got it. So how long is this process that we just described? It's
2 months.
2 months.
I can do it in a month. It averages about 6 weeks, but working with everyone's schedule and just taking the time, it lasts about 2 months. And I tell people that up front, it'll take about 2 months. And some people are like, I can't go 2 months. I'm like, that's okay. There's lots of other teams. We wish the best.
Okay. So what, yes. So God, I have so many more questions. What do you like? What if you're trying to scale up fast and you need to hire like 150 people in a matter of 12 months? Like, how would you facilitate a process like that?
You're going to need to get help to hire that many people. But there's an old adage that people say all the time, but they don't really listen to it. And that is you hire slowly and you fire quickly. You hire slow, fire fast. The problem is most people don't take the necessary time to hire. And so if you're going to need to hire that many people that, in 12 months, you're going to have to get recruit help to hire that many people. So, but you're still going to want to take them through 2 months, Chris. If you want people, if you're hiring for retention and not just to fill position, then you're going to need to take the time. Now, I have had one of my clients was able, squished it all together in 2 weeks, but it was really stressful for them to crunch it all in 2 weeks.
Got it.
And by the way, the top companies with the greatest retention take anywhere from 2 months to 9 months to hire somebody.
Wow. 2 months to 9 months.
The company that has the highest retention rate does 25 interviews with people, and it takes 9 years.
Who is that? Who has the highest retention rate?
It is a hotel chain, and I can't remember off the top of my head.
Is that one based out of San Francisco? They wrote that amazing book. God, I forgot the name of the book. And it's like some weird name for the hotel.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I forgot the name of the book and the hotel, but anyways, cool. And what?
So what's next?
What's that? Yeah. What's after Jason meets him? What happens after that?
So my second favorite part of the interview process is Jason and I take them and their significant other out to dinner. We do this for a couple reasons. Number one, we want to see if significant other is crazy, because if they are, you're hiring crazy. And number two, we want to see how we want the spouse's buy-in. We want their opinions. We want them to be able to ask questions. I know everybody's spouse on our team, or their girlfriends or boyfriends or significant others. I know people's kids.
What if they're single?
If they're single, then we just take them by themselves. Something beautiful happens when you break bread with people and you see them in a different light, and they're able to relax a little bit and laugh. And there's something about eating with a person that just kind of bonds you to a person just a little bit. And so we of course pay for the dinner. And if everything checks out with their spouse and they're a halfway decent human being, then we offer them the paid working interview, which is 60 days. It's intense. It's hard. We tell them it's intense and hard. We say 50% won't make it through. And by this time, if I've gone through 200 applicants, I'm lucky if I bring on 2 of those people. Again, we become very, very nitpicky about who we bring on.
So we don't have enough time to dial into the paid working interview part. And I mean, I think if people are watching this and they need help recruiting, they should seriously consider hiring you, number one. And two, I guess they'll have to figure out how, looks like we have a guest on here. Hang on one second. So if they need more help, they should reach out to you. But
yes, which I do have something free they can download.
So the paid working interview, how many, like if you hire 5 people to go through the paid working interview, how many people will make it through the paid working interview if you get 5? Half. Okay. So half of them paid interview. Okay. Mm-hmm. Got it.
So our goal is to find the diamonds, and there's I heard a real estate coach say buyer's agents are a dime a dozen, and that's true. The problem is really good buyer's agents are like diamonds, and you want to find the diamonds because they'll stay, they'll give you their hearts, and they'll work their tails off, and they'll do awesome. And that's what we're looking for. I don't need a million haphazard crazy people who are going to create a toxic environment in our little company.
Let me ask you a quick question. So do you feel like through this process, before they get into the working interview, you can find someone that's a good culture fit just based off this process alone?
Absolutely. That's my whole intention, is to look, are they a good culture fit? And do they have the potential to have the skills to do it?
So then in the actual working interview process, why do half the people fall off? What are the reasons?
Because they say it's too hard. And seriously, oh wow, I didn't think real estate would be this hard. And during that time, they're not even showing houses. They're just cold calling, and then we turn them on to warmer leads and then hot leads. But we know the process works because by the last week, our hope is that the appointments that they set up are for themselves for when they graduate from boot camp or the paid working interview. And that's what we've seen is people hit the ground running. We had our most recent boot camp graduated in April. We had all three graduated because again, we're very methodic about who we bring on, how many we bring on at a time. And of those three, two of them put 2 people under contract the first day that they hit the ground running as agents. The other one took a week. So we know it works, and they're killing it. They're doing awesome. So we know it works. So that's what we do.
So it's right at an hour, and we could probably go on for longer, but tell me how people can reach out to you. How can they get more information about you? What do you recommend?
So I'd love to give you, if you want a free download of the whole process, and I don't go in the download, it doesn't go a great deal into the boot camp part, but it is www.diywhiringsolutions.com. Again, DIYhiringsolutions.com. That's a free download if you'd like to know the Daniels hiring method and how we hire. Or you can go to my website, www.diywhiring.com. I have a course coming out on how to hire. I can consult with you and teach you how to hire and teach your company how to hire the process, or I can do it for you. But yeah, I'd love to help you out any way that I can, because you're my people. So
cool. Well, thank you so much for being on. This has been absolutely amazing. And God, for anybody watching this that is, a small business owner and aspiring to be a CEO and have a business that can, largely operate without them being in the business. Janae, I think you would agree. Like I said earlier, 80% of your success is predicated on the recruiting and selection process. So you guys should definitely check out Janae. And guys, thanks so much for tuning in to our podcast, CEO Secrets. And I'll have the information about Janae posted below if you're watching this on the replay. So you guys can check her out online and follow up with her for that free content. Janae, thank you again so much. It's been absolutely amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and for all you guys listening to the podcast, whether you're on audio or video, you guys should know, if you guys are listening to the podcast or watching us live, we're giving away a copy of our book, The $1 Million Real Estate Team, for free. All you've got to do is pay shipping handling. It's a 220-page book. Like, spend a year writing it. You guys can read the reviews online. It's $20 on Amazon. Don't spend the $20 on Amazon. I'll send you a copy of it free. So anyways, again, Janae, thanks so much, guys. Everybody have a great week, and thanks for chiming in.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.